Hello, it's Claire, and this is my research study presentation. I'm titling it Passing the Ball, and that is something of a metaphor. We're talking about trans women and women's sports. Um, so when you think about sports, passing the ball, but then also the study is about more specifically trans women being stealth or navigating being stealth, or passing is another term in that area. So yeah, that's it. It's a metaphor. You'll connect the dots later, hopefully. All right, so terminology, it would be important to explicitly define these terms because they are terms which can they can mean a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. Even researchers may use them differently. It's hard to say that they have a definitive definition, um, although they're useful because they're the terms that we have. They're the most common terms. Um, and so, and they're probably the most appropriate terms. I just want to say that a couple of these are harmful potentially. Um, I don't know how to explain exactly why they're harmful without going on a tangent, but I'll just say I'm trans and I find that these are harmful terms. But then again, like I said, they're the best that we have. So, all right, so study purpose. The purpose of this exploratory study is to better understand the influences of being or not being stealth and its degrees for adult trans women in women's team sports related to their mental health and well-being. We are only looking at trans women who perceive themselves as having the option of being stealth or at least being somewhat stealth. All right, a few things here. Being stealth, really quickly, defining it. It's when a trans individual is typically being perceived as cisgender, and they are also choosing to not disclose that they are trans. And then also that experience is a spectrum. Or it's a spectrum in a few ways, but we're going to address one aspect of it being a spectrum is particularly important for this study design, and we'll go into that more later. And then, so I wish I could go into more as to why we're only looking at this subset of trans women. Let's just say that those two experiences of um, being perceived as cis or not being perceived as cis, they just they have dramatic social differences. Um, they create entirely different experiences in the social world of trans women. So that's why I've chosen just to look at this one subset. Here are my research questions. I'm not going to read them just because um, I'm running out of time, but I want to note stealth, the use of stealth in these research questions, talking about the defined degrees of being stealth and what that looks like real quick. So in this case, we're talking about the number of individuals that a trans individual um, has disclosed their trans identity to. So if on one side of the spectrum we have absence of stealth, and so that trans individual has told everyone associated with their sports team that they are trans. Like we're talking like teammates, coaches, referees, people in administrative roles associated with the sports team. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we're looking at being completely stealth, so they do not disclose to anyone associated with that sports team their trans identity. Here is what we'll want to look at in the literature review. For the first one, unfortunately, the reality is that there's probably no research on various degrees of stealth in group environments. Any kinds of group environments, there's just no research on various degrees of stealth in general. It's kind of like the research that is there is stealth or not stealth. So that's what we'll have to work with. But it'll still be helpful because even though it's not, it's kind of a starting place to understand what we, the significance of what we're looking at, like what we will find in our research, at least like the possible significance. And in general, it helps us to have a lens for the research that we are conducting. The second one, that's helpful because that's assisting us to answer one of our research questions. Because we are trying to see if trans women are getting the same benefits from women's team sports as cis women. We're just also looking at like the effects of um, stealth of being stealth or like the various degrees of being stealth. So, and also we want to know like what a trans women struggle with generally in terms of like mental health, just because um, that's helpful in terms of seeing what team sports could provide, and specifically what team sports could provide in relation to certain the categories of being stealth that I have defined. So research design variables, data collection, there's a lot on this slide. Why are we using quantitative instead of qualitative? Mostly because it's a self-administered questionnaire. And I mean, according to the textbook that we use for the class by Chrisick Judy, I cite it in AP. I did the APA citation. You'll see it at the end of the presentation. But she says, direct quote, a researcher would seldom administer a semi-structured survey by any means other than an interview because of the length of time and writing required in answering the open-ended questions. Um, and so, um, and so because we're not doing an interview and we're doing a self-administered questionnaire, um, they're saying that is saying basically it makes the most sense to do quantitative questions, um, to do quantitative questions and not qualitative. Um, and also it's like we want this survey to be completed, like we want it to have a high completion rate, and so we're trying to make it as easy for people to complete as possible, and it's just easier for people to fill in the blank than to have to like write out um, to describe their subjective feelings about a question. Although there would be a lot of utility to having that information, but we'll talk more about that later. So also just want to go into some of the dependent variables and how we are measuring them. Social support, trust, social involvement, we are using um, the Likert scale. So we'll provide the definition of each term and then have a statement like, I have experienced blank term in the past 2 weeks, and then use that Likert scale. Um, and the reason why we're looking at these is because of research that I've also cited at the back of the presentation in APA, that says for women that um, women's sports um, facilitates these psychosocial conditions, um, and that these are um, correlated by research to depression, anxiety, well-being. Um, I mean, correlated to um, lack, negative depression, well-being, negative anxiety. So that's why we're looking at that. And then we're looking at some dependent variables specific to the trans community. Also got these from research, other research um, that I've also cited in APA at the back of the presentation. Perceived social stigma, perceived and internalized stigma. Again, we'll use the Likert scale for these. Um, and basically, the research that I got these from said like these are tied to like so having the experience of perceived social stigma for a trans individual, um, the presence of that perceived social stigma um, leads to worse mental health outcomes. It leads to lower well-being scores, and then the same goes for perceived internalized stigma. And so that's why we're looking at those dependent variables. For sampling, we'll be using a non-probability convenience sampling. And while a random sample is always ideal, it's not possible for this study. And that's because that's for a few reasons. So we have to think of how are we going to recruit, um, how are we going to recruit these? Where are we going to find these individuals to complete this survey? And I was thinking really hard about this. I was like, how in the world? Because we're talking about a population that is so small. Like, I think there's like 2.1 million trans adults in the United States. Then how many of those are trans women? How many of those are trans women that are actively playing sports? How many of those are trans women that will take this survey? And so, um, yeah, and then there are trans women also that are stealth or some degree of stealth, most likely, and so they probably don't want to be participating in a survey that openly is talking about their trans identity. So we're probably going to get this out to people we're probably going to get this out to the people we're looking for, like by running an advertisement, or I don't even know, like reaching out to medical clinics that provide hormones to trans women and being like, hey, can you give this to your trans female clients, and just be like, hey, if you play sports, like consider filling out this survey. And so that method is not, that's convenient sampling. So and then honestly, I don't even know if this is possible. Like, I don't know if we could get, like, I just feel that this is going to be really challenging. But at the same time, like, trans women deserve to have research that is potentially helpful to them, even if it's not going to benefit every single trans woman. I mean, like, I just feel like if we were just talking about women, cisgender women, we would say, of course, let's do research if it could benefit like a significant, like, if it could benefit 10% of women. And so I don't like the notion that like, no, we can't do this because um, it's just such a small number of trans women because it like trans women that are actively playing sports like that is probably a significant like percentage. That's probably like I don't know 5, 10, 15, 20% of trans women. So yeah, but that's a little bit of a tangent. So I'm this is going to be national, and then I'm including the UK because the political climate is similar, culturally a bit similar, kind of, but I felt like it was similar enough that I could include it, and then that boosts the numbers of potential people that we can get this survey to. Um, yeah. And then for the incentive, um, I thought about it like, okay, I don't really want to give cash because if we're running ads online for this anonymous online survey, like people could lie and just like complete the survey and say that they're trans and then get the money. Um, and so I didn't want to incentivize that. So instead, I thought like, okay, I'll say if you complete the survey, we'll donate $50 to an LGBTQ advocacy organization, um, like of your choice out of like three possible choices. And I feel like this is a good incentive because it's like you can frame the like you doing the study as like, oh, you're like helping your like the community, um, and then also like people won't be motivated to take this interview. Like I feel unless like I feel like I don't know. I think it's a good protective barrier because people that are gonna like you're gonna avoid the people that are looking just to complete surveys for the financial incentive and they don't care whether they actually are um, assisting with research or not. They don't care about like accuracy or not. So um, I don't know. That's my best guess. That's my intuition. Um, this is my creative my potential creative solution for the incentive. Here are some ethical issues I've identified, and I'm super out of time, so I'm not going to read them. But yeah, I think it's just really important, like the to communicate the anonymous nature of the survey, being transparent, with informed consent about what's going on, that this is a research study, who's conducting the research, because I think like failing to do that could produce a lot of anxiety for the population that would be taking this survey, considering they want to be stealth or um, it's likely that they want to be somewhere within the spectrum of stealth. So yeah, I think that's probably most important. Um, oh yeah, just like providing like at the end of the survey, like here's some like relevant hotlines for trans people. If you are like struggling with a mental health issue or crisis. Um, yeah, I think that's important to provide in this kind of research or this kind of study. All right, here are my strengths and weaknesses that I see in this study. And a lot of these weaknesses, it's just like, it's because it's quantitative research. Um, yeah, um, and because it's pre-experimental. Um, so, and I feel like I already went on a bit of a tangent on what I see the strengths as. But yeah, my central conclusion is just that sports presents a potential effective intervention for the health and well-being of trans women, just as it does for cis women. Um, this will help not only to see the evidence for or against this claim, but also help social workers know some specific challenges or benefits that could commonly arise from how their trans female clients navigate their participation. Um, yeah, I don't. My feeling is that this is just super important for the community. Um, Obviously, I don't know how the research would turn out, but my feeling about it is that there's research that shows that um, team sports for cisgender women is super helpful for mental health reasons. And I think that the trans women who disproportionately struggle at higher rates with mental health issues largely because of marginalization could really benefit from sports as well. And I wish that there was more research that showed that. There's not really research at all that shows that. And then also like kind of showed as well, how do we navigate that? Is it helpful to navigate it from a place of being stealth or somewhat stealth or just disclosing your identity? Like, I think that these are all very worthwhile. Um, this is a worthwhile pursuit. So yeah, that's my project.